Hmm. Let's see if this is any better audio-wise. I'm gonna keep this hand. White. There's no way that they have a kill spell on turn 2. And we drew the land anyway. I'm a god of magic. Oh, oh, yeah. Oh no. Whatever am I to do? So, two choices here. We can either Elvish Mystic, or we can just hit the Old Growth Troll. I think hit the Old Growth Troll button is the way we want to go in this match. We just want to blanket out. We want to blank out their aggro. Really like kill that. All right, that's fine. Holy Jesus Christ! Land there is phenomenal. So we're just gonna hit another Old Growth Troll. Then next turn we'll have Elvish Mystic, Lovestruck Beast. What's he thinking? If he has a Wandering Emperor, he might just pass. If he's deciding whether or not to just swing, maybe he's DC'd, because right now it doesn't look like he's touching anything. So if he's thinking, he's probably thinking about some sort of card in his hand. That's normally what people think about when they play this. It's a card game. I don't know if you guys know this, but that's like generally the vibe. Okay, so let's just go Llanowar Elf. Yeah, I don't need really full value out of this Lovestruck Beast. And I am cool with just about any trade here. So I should have waited to play the Lovestruck Beast, because now he's probably just going to take it. And I'm fine with that. Worst thing that can happen is next turn has... Ooh, there you go. That's the worst thing that can happen. But that's actually pretty good for us, because what the Brave the Elements does not do... Well, first of all, it ramps us, right? Like, we're fine with this. But now he can't use this Brave the Elements to win the game, which is the real reason why this Brave the Elements is important. That being said... Oh, Dan's online. Hey, Dan.
I am so sorry.
No. I decided to record a monogreen video just to, like, test out my audio, and now you're a part of it.
Oh, well, I hate to ambush you like this, but I could participate in some mono green commentary. Let's see what's going on.
Oh, yeah, take a look. So right now we're against Mono White, and they just made a play where I swung out. They had 2 mana open. They cast Brave the Elements to kill my Old Growth Troll. That
Sure.
ramped me, and it also... Extraction Specialist with no value. Love that. Yeah, so right now we're about to pog all over them. So the question is Storm the Festival or Nissa, and I think it has to be Storm the Festival.
I think so too.
Ooh, that sucked. That was really bad.
Yeah, that was terrible, some would say.
We'll take a land here, because it's the same amount of ramp to do the Wolf Willow Haven, and now we'll get to also cast our Nissa.
Mm-hmm.
So now we can cast Nissa. We don't have enough to untap the Nykthos and then use it. Yeah. So we'll just untap like a regular forest. have it
Behold,
chill,
nature's true power.
blocking these guys. Just hang out. This is
Now the
gonna get
mono
very
white deck
confusing.
won Worlds, yeah. What was it up against?
It didn't.
at that...
It wasn't Worlds. It was the regional
Oh, I'm
championship.
sorry. Yeah, regional. Yeah,
Yeah,
That's
and it was up against Phoenix. There was a lot of Phoenix and a lot of
That's
white
right.
in the. Oh,
that's right.
this is why he felt so free to cast his Brave the Elements. He just had 2 of them.
Well, the forest isn't green, right? Or is it? Does it become?
Yeah, the forest isn't green. That's
Yeah.
one of the reasons to play Nissa.
Yep. Does he know that lands aren't colored?
We're gonna find out.
I'm
'Cause
gonna
we're about
say
to get this guy back.
He didn't
Uh,
realize
I'm-
that. Yeah.
I think he's gonna. I think we're gonna hear an oops after this.
Yep.
Stop.
Because now we have. Yeah. Okay. That is a shame conceit if I have ever seen one.
Ooh.
We probably could have hit the combo next turn anyway. And the beautiful thing about this deck, you never board.
The
It's so
only
easy.
reason to play the deck.
It's so simple. It's simple like my brain. Just smooth.
My friend Lucas has the smoothest brain.
Oh yeah.
Don't
And
ever say
thing,
otherwise.
The only thing in there are 1 mana elves, and large creatures. I've becoming
green
one.
pips.
I've been becoming one with the green lifestyle of not
I'm kinda
making very many
surprised-
plans.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm kind of surprised that you've taken so well to this mono green deck.
Well, it's super different from the decks that I normally play.
Well,
But-
right. That's why I'm surprised that you've chosen to go down this route and not some other route.
Well, the thing is, like, I do think the deck is like one of the better things to be doing in Pioneer. So now that it's on Arena,
Yeah.
it's like fun to learn, and it's also like
Yeah.
very fun to be playing in a very different way than I'm used to.
Mhm.
Like, I was gonna get into this. I don't know if you saw the show notes, but the mono green.
I saw
deck
you
is one
post
that
it. I
think is,
haven't
like,
watched it.
super. It's like super technical and not very like strategic based,
Mhm.
which a lot of the decks that I run are much more like Rakdos mid and the standard Grixis deck. They're all like very strategic and not very
Mhm.
like technically challenging. This one is like, oh, you're going to be on autopilot for most of the turns of the game. Then on exactly 2 turns, you need to be able to maximize as much value as possible, or else you're just going to fumble.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because I've always seen you as a much better technical player. Like, I think I think you're the sack
a
deck.
good like technical player.
Like, so in the sense that like it's a very different thematic deck than you're used to. But like, wow.
Oh man, I love this.
Are we cold opening? Have we cold opened?
Well,
I'm not recording, so
I
no.
have your audio for this, so if you wanna have a cold open about mono green, it's here.
What's going on, goblins? Welcome to the UCAPOG Playing Podcast, featuring your hosts, UCAPOG Dan.
And you see a Pog Lucas. This is episode 7.
7. And thinking about it, it's become much more pod and a lot less play, but we have been posting play videos on the channel outside of this, so go check those out. And we'll probably fold some more play back in, why not? Keep it fresh.
Oh yeah, we got a couple showdowns, we got a couple deck techs, some good stuff. A lot of dunking on Rakdos mid. I feel like our channel is becoming a Rakdos mid hate channel.
At least, life imitates art, or whatever the opposite. Art imitates life. It's not vastly different from me actually hating Rakdos mid in real life. So I'm glad that our pod reflects that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I cannot stand the deck personally, but we'll be able to talk about that as the pod unfolds.
Sure.
Is there any new news going on?
Other than the new year, not really. Decathlon's up, which seems kind of interesting. I think they did the decathlon once before too, right? I feel like I remembered it.
This is their second decathlon.
Yeah.
But the first decathlon kind of sucked because all the events were not fun. Mm-hmm. And I did not participate personally.
No, I don't think I did either. Good. They seem alright. I played one jump in. I'm not a huge jump in fan. I know you play like jump in actually kind of casually, right? Sometimes.
Yeah, I'm a big jump in fan. The only real problem with it is that all of the people who are playing it otherwise are just garbage.
Right.
So you can't really get good games. But
right. My problem with it is mostly just because it seems like the packs aren't super balanced, which is fine. But I don't know what any of the packs are and which ones are good and which ones aren't. So, and I don't know how willing I am to figure that out for the decathlon event. But like conceptually, I think it's an interesting format.
Yeah, and honestly, like the way that you play is just like limited. So as long as you're good at piloting a limited deck, then you'll do fine in the jump in event.
Yeah, but piloting the limited deck isn't the fun part of limited for me. It's like, you know, all the worst parts of limited, just play that. It's like, thanks. Great, I get to play games of limited with decks I don't make. I get to play someone else's limited draft.
Dude, that's I love playing I love the little like, combat games. Ooh, let me count up how much defense this guy has. And
That's
I'll count up how much offense I have.
I hate you, but but all right. So yeah, we'll be playing that going forward. Maybe we'll post a couple of those videos if they're.
I'd like to, but I did already finish mine.
No, not the jump in, but future decathlon stuff.
Yeah, maybe some of the later events.
But here I have, in addition to decathlon, it says Cube is done. Sad, which we can all agree with.
I'm so sad about Cube.
Bro, I love Arena Cube. Arena Cube is great. The Chromatic Cube, less good, but the Arena Cube is awesome.
Do you have any thoughts about how this one was this time?
Yeah, actually, I do have
last cubes.
I do. Unfortunately, I didn't play as much Arena Cube as I would have liked, just because of the holiday and some other stuff. So I didn't get to like sink my teeth as far into it as I did with the most recent Chromatic Cube, like to compare. But I think the color disparity or the color rebalance is pretty significant in this Arena Cube iteration. I felt like green and green-white in particular were way better. Green-black was better in this cube than it has been traditionally. I think some of the packages have kind of gotten stripped away, so like there was less of a blink package. I think only Teleportation Circle and Ephemerate were in the cube. I'm not even sure if Soul Hoarder was.
You know, good riddance.
Yeah. I liked those cards, although it was a little too easy to get into. Once you got a couple of them, you were kind of locked into the deck. And I thought there were less decks like that, which I think was mostly for the better.
It seems like it's been almost totally replaced by the sacrifice package. Like all of the like really consistent blink decks are now just really consistent sacrifice decks.
I can never
blood artist effects and like
we might be getting into this in like a weird way in this podcast, but I straight up can't play the sac deck in the Arena Cube. No idea. I don't know how to build it well. I don't know how to pilot it well. I just stay far away from it because I just don't know how to build it. And like I don't know how many sac enablers you need for sac payoffs. I don't know how you freaking win the game. Like
which decks were you playing in the cube? Mostly like ramp stuff?
I played a lot of like blue mid-range, which is my go-to cube deck in general. So like Brazen Borrowers, like Skyclave Apparition piles, where it's just like a bunch of 3 and 4 mana blue and white spells, and you go to town. Teferis.
Shout out.
I tried to play like green blue value pile, which didn't really come together. In Arena Cube, I force a lot more stuff just because I feel like playing it.
Well, Arena Cube, you can do it. You know, there's just always the cards there, and you can cut stuff off super easy.
Yeah, and that's part of the fun of Cube, right? Like I know what kind of decks I like to play, and so when I find them, I play them. Whether or not they're like the most open deck is like up for debate. I play aggro. I played like a bit of white aggro in the cube. Mm-hmm. I try to keep it fresh, but yeah, I can't necessarily draft the sack deck. Not sure why. Maybe we'll have to go through next time Arena Cube's up, you'll have to give me a run. We'll just force sack like 2 or 3 drafts in a row and see what happens.
Yeah, for sure, because that's definitely one of my favorite archetypes in Cube. Basically, every single draft I did that was successful was either a ramp pile or a like basically mono green splashing whatever payoffs I want, or it was like a straight up like very streamlined or shove sack deck. And then the ones that weren't successful were like aggro pile, you know, just decks that didn't get there.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have an awesome win rate this Arena Cube season, but I wasn't also playing for that. I just wanted to play my like blue value piles and see where they got me. So in that sense, I was quite successful.
In that sense, we're all the winners here.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, as for constructed, what have you been messing around with?
So, other than the decathlon event, which was Pauper as well, the second one.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it's fun, but it was standard Pauper, and it got broken super quickly.
I was gonna say I would
Feeling
just
it.
download a deck, right? Like brewing for standard Pauper sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah, it was really stupid. I brewed one deck, which was like a Rakdos sack deck, and went 3-3 with it, and was like, you know what, I'll just grab a list online. Fire Shoes on Twitter posted a list for a mono white deck that just had basically every single card said draw a card on it, and then it had
Sounds pretty
one
good.
creature that could give an anthem. So it was just a ton of really grindy mono white mirrors for the whole event.
Yeah, that doesn't
I was
sound
able
like a
to
ton of
trophy on
fun.
it a second time.
Oh hell yeah, dude!
Yeah, it was not
Nature
super fun,
flows
but the
with vigor.
like it made it a lot quicker.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have to take a huge amount of like shots to get through it.
Yeah, and then other than the Pauper event, what constructed have you been playing?
Yeah, so I've been playing a lot of mono green. The it's been a super huge learning curve because I've played like big top end decks before and I've played combo style decks before, but this was just a whole different set of combos and a whole different system of how you want to like maximize the value of the deck. So like the way the deck normally plays out is 90% of the turns completely on autopilot. Turn 1 you play your Llanowar Elves, turn 2 you play like either 1 or 2 ramp spells, or you slam an Old Growth Troll. Those are like the 2 routes you have. Then turn 3 you slam a Planeswalker or Karn, and then like turn 4 and turn 5 you try and go off. And like the way that you can do well with the deck is when you're going off, you need to be able to like maximize how much mana you're able to make with Nykthos, and know when you can combo, know when you can just put a bunch of things on the field, know when you're safe, when you can turn the corner. So that's like, no, the strategy is almost always the same for every single game. So that's why you can just kind of run it normally and run it with like just spewing the cards out of your hand. But the real technical challenge of it is getting the most out of those 1 or 2 turns
Not to brag, but like
because there are
the
times where
ocean
if you don't get
surges,
enough out of those
life
turns, you
thrives.
just either you get everything answered by a control deck, or you don't do enough to stabilize the aggro deck.
Would you say like sequencing is the
This
most
is
important part of
my
that deck,
home,
like
and I
spell
don't appreciate
sequencing,
it.
or is it
One of your
is it
friends has
something
to
else?
leave.
Well, it's really 3 things. So it's sequencing in terms of like how you like sequence your turn in order to maximize the mana out of Nykthos, and how you sequence your untaps. So like untapping
Leave
with
my
Fiora,
squids
untapping
alone.
with Nissa, and playing a second Nykthos. All of those 3 things, knowing when to actually fit that in so that you get the most out of your devotion, is critical. Being able to play as much shit as you want. Karn searches. So I mean, you've got 15 cards. Really get the maximum out of the deck if you built your board correctly. You're able to
Let's
select
get
the
moving.
exact card that you need to win the game. And the last thing is just knowing when you can combo, which that's just kind of rote memorization. You start comboing before you get to the end of the turn, and it's maybe every 5th game or every 5th or 6th game that you actually pull off the combo, and you really only do it in one of the matches. But when you do it, it's an instant win, so you just should search for it all the time. Which, by the way, anyone who's trying to learn Mono Green Devotion in the audience, it's 14 mana, and you need 2 Karns, 2 Kioras, and you can find a 3rd Karn while you're comboing to get the all of the activations that you need.
And
And as silly as that sounds, you mill all of them. It's in your graveyard or in your hand.
and the combo is deterministic, right?
Yes, it's a deterministic win.
You're not rather sorry. You can't whiff. Like if you have all the pieces, you can't whiff on it.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
somewhat easy to interact with is the problem. So you need to be able to know that you can go for it and not get your pestilent cauldron countered.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Also, you need to be able to know that you're like going to be able to like finish it out. The real challenge of it is it's a very slow combo. So each cycle you gain 4 life, and you need to gain as much life as they have cards in their deck.
Okay.
So that means you need to loop 2 planeswalkers and get back your cauldron and cast it and untap Nykthos. Like, if they have 50 cards in their deck, you need to do it like, what is it, like 20 times? No, that wouldn't even be, I guess 25 times. So, really, you run out of time pretty quickly.
Okay.
Which means that when you're playing on Arena, you kind of have to take the multiple loops that you're going through and then figure out, oh, am I going to make it this turn? Or am I going to have to cut this short and just get an immense amount of value out of it?
Is there no Aetherflux Reservoir finish where you just like pay 50 life to deal 50 damage, or is that just a slower finish? Is
Well,
that like
the problem with using the Aetherflux finish is you would need another Karn activation.
Oh, you need
in order to
another
get the
Karn, yeah.
Aetherflux
Yeah.
onto the board. Also, you gain them 4 life every time you cast it. So eventually you'll be able to like, if you keep looping it, yeah, you'll be able to do it. But yeah,
That's just not the most efficient finish.
It's not the most efficient finish. It also takes up an extra sideboard slot, so I think a lot of the Pioneer decks don't run it because they don't really need to.
Right, yeah. I mean, if it's just a worse combo finish, then why run it at all?
Yeah, I mean, if the Chain Veil was in the format, which would give me an extra Karn activation, I'd play it in an instant
Right,
just to cut
yeah,
down
yeah.
on the time, you know?
Yep.
But unfortunately, it is not.
Soon enough, friend Lucas.
Ugh, I'm waiting for it. I'm waiting for it. So I guess this kind of brings us into our main topic, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
We're going to be talking about technical play versus strategic play, and what that the implications of what of those two sort of philosophies, as well as how they interact, and how to get better at both separately. I think Lucas is going to really run this conversation. He's got like, I don't know, 300 words in the show notes, which is 298 more than we've ever had.
That's
So
very true. Usually it just says like goblin.
and then to be fair, then it says etc. after the goblin, just to imply that there's really more under the cover. But
Yeah,
I think
but technically goblin is just one word. So so I think the easiest way of getting into the conversation is first by saying what we mean by technical gameplay and strategic gameplay.
Yeah.
So when we say strategic gameplay, we're really talking about forming a game plan to maximize your odds of winning a match. So if you're playing against a combo deck, your plan might be, I'm going to disrupt the combo and that's how I win. If you're playing against a control deck, it might be, my game plan is to get underneath them in order to win. There are some decks that don't really have a diversity of strategic gameplays or know where that gameplay comes into effect, but every deck is going to have some range of strategic game plans that you need to formulate when you're actually doing the game.
Yeah, and I will go even a slightly further and say that to me, strategic gameplay is not just maximizing how you like your odds to win the game, but literally what it looks like in your head to win a certain matchup. And so all the decisions you make in that game, given no other externalities, are maximizing your chances to fulfill that strategic idea. And so this could sometimes even come down to individual cards. So in standard, it might be we are not going to let Shieldred beat us. And our game plan is take care of Shieldred and win the game some other way, for instance. That could be an idea of strategic gameplay. Or it could simply be apply as much pressure early on in the game as possible and let's not worry about what the opponent plays. That could be a different extreme of a different strategic game plan. But it's effectively going in... and for me, it's a lot of thought before you even draw cards. It's all the thought that goes into the game before you even get to your opening hand, as to what you're hoping the game is going to look like, and if the game doesn't look like the way you hope it's going to look like, how you're going to influence the game to your advantage. Without cards, it's everything without cards, essentially, for me.
No, I totally agree with that. And honestly, it comes into play not just when you're running a deck and you're thinking about, okay, here's what my hand looks like, what's going to be my strategy to finish the game, but also in the deck building portion where you're building your sideboard, you're choosing the slots for your deck. Oh, I'm running Rakdos midrange. What's my split of Graveyard Trespassers versus Lilianas? The only thing that you should really be thinking about is not really, oh, well, what kind of cool combo can I pull off with my Fable of the Mirror Breaker and Graveyard Trespasser? It's that would be a technical gameplay thing. What you should be thinking about is, what decks am I trying to answer with these slots, which is strategic gameplay. How am I going to win against this deck, and the other deck?
I'm glad you brought up brewing, because I do think the strategic side of the gameplay is what most closely interacts with your deck building side. It's how your deck building influences your actual gameplay, is your strategy, right? So like your deck building game plan has to be well aligned with what you project your game plan to be, in order for your strategic game plan to come to fruition. I will also say that when we're brewing, I'll often think about things in this context, especially in something like, it's easiest to visualize in something like a control deck, where you say, okay, I'm going to gain a winning advantage in some way, and then the way we close it out doesn't really matter, right? It could be pick your closing card du jour, right? It might be Dream Trawler, it might be Teferi, it might be a giant shark, it might be Castle Ardenvale. That's the tokens one, right? Yeah, Castle Ardenvale.
That's the
it could be any of those things. It doesn't really matter, because the the strategic game plan that you've put together in your head has given you a winning position at turn, let's say 8 in the game. And then from there, it doesn't matter how you win the game. Now that's very different from the technical side, which is cares very much about how you win the game, like the actual mechanics of doing so.
Yeah, and what we mean by technical gameplay, it's basically how you're crafting the turn to achieve the set of board states that you set out in that strategic game. So when you're playing through the game, it's what line that you take in terms of card order and card timing.
And I would generalize that by saying if strategic gameplay is everything that has nothing to do with the cards, technical gameplay is very card centric. It's literally what you're doing with the cards. So exactly. Sacking a land or rather fetching a land on a particular phase, getting a particular land rather than a different land, is all technical gameplay. You know, swinging with 2 creatures rather than 1. Swinging with everything. These micro decisions are technical gameplay to me.
Yeah. One of the things I love about technical gameplay too is that you can watch back the tape, see what happens, and then make a call as to whether or not the decision you made was like literally right. You can have perfect technical gameplay, even if the odds don't match up in your favor at the end of the day. You can say that you maximized your odds. If you see someone's deck list, okay, I know what cards he has, I know what outs he has, I'm going to play this line. If he has it, he has it, right? So, like, if you watch back a tape, and then you see your hand of cards in, like, a sack deck, and you realize, oh, I missed a double hit, that's a technical gameplay problem versus a strategic gameplay problem of, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't have been trying to get underneath this deck, maybe I should have just waited it out. So it's really how you're crafting lines with different decks.
Now, can I ask you a bit of an abstracted question? It actually comes from chess.
Of course.
So there's a famous quote, I'm paraphrasing it because I don't exactly know what it is. It says
Time to ebb
something
from
along the lines
battle.
of a good strategy with no tactics. So tactics in chess is effectively, in my opinion, technical play in Magic. A good strategy with no tactics is it will
Not
win the
bad.
game very slowly.
But my friend's kind of a big
Whereas
deal.
all tactics and the wrong strategy will lose the game dramatically. So effectively, it's saying tactics help to win the game efficiently, but having the correct strategy is mostly what's going to lead you to victory. Would you say that Magic? Would you agree or disagree in Magic
I
context?
didn't feel like fighting
Can you win a
I-
game with poor strategy?
I think you can. You can get lucky and win a game with poor strategy, but it's definitely the more important of the two aspects. If you're dropping triggers or if you're missing a point of damage here or there, it's much less important than if you're overextending into the sweep, right? Or if
Yeah.
you're just trying to control an aggregate that you instead should be racing, right?
Yeah, to be fair, it's actually it was a bit of a leading question. I totally agree. So I think what delineates Magic from something like chess is variance and just luck. And so you can luck into wins with the poor strategy, but if we're talking about overall win rate, I think strategy is
Bet
going to
you've
have
never
your
been
most
hugged by a crab.
is going to influence your long-term win rate the most, having a good strategic gameplay. But technical gameplay is really what's going to push you up into the upper echelons of. I'm sorry, did I say I meant technical gameplay? I don't know what I said before, but technical gameplay is what's going to push
You
you
did
up
say
into
that.
the upper echelons of your bracket or your local game store or whatever it may be. Maximizing every turn is what makes good players great.
Yeah, absolutely. And the another nice thing about the two is it's not like they're 100% separate, because the idea is
wary
that
of the
this
ground
technical
you walk
gameplay is
on.
not like an isolated event. It's subservient to what your strategic gameplay is.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
What you're looking to do is maximize each turn for an objective. So that might not mean maximizing all the mana that you spent in a turn. That might not mean maximizing all of the triggers that you get. If it's better to hold off on those resources, or if it's better to do something else, because the actual
When the
technical
land
aspect
speaks, I
is
shall
the
listen.
thing that's leading you towards a strategic goal,
Right.
not
So
necessarily just maximizing how well you do in everything.
yeah, good point. So like good technical gameplay doesn't always look like I need to have the most efficient turn possible. Use all my mana, use all my cards, swing with all my creatures. That's not necessarily what technical gameplay is. It's saying, how am I going to use all the resources at my disposal to create the most efficient path to my ultimate goal, which is your strategic plan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Now that we've now that we've taken care of definitions, what would you like to get into?
Well, I honestly think that this interplay of technical and strategic gameplay is super important for the current, I guess, Pioneer and also Explorer meta.
Mm-hmm.
Because the way and you can contradict me if you think that this is incorrect. I think that the two pillars of the format, Mono Green and Rakdos, the decks that everyone's trying to answer, the decks that everyone's talking about in terms of the polls of the format. One of them is extremely technical, and the other is extremely strategic, and they don't have a whole lot of crossover. So we were talking about Mono Green earlier in the show, I think that of the two, it's the more technical deck, and the way that you craft your turns is how you improve playing the deck. So
Yeah, for sure. I will say just generally two combo decks. If we're considering Mono Green a combo deck primarily, I would say combo decks tend to be more technically focused.
Yeah, I guess if you had to put it as something, it's probably a big mid-range deck with a combo finish.
I would personally say what makes it viable competitively is the combo finish. I think if it was just a beatdown deck, it would be outmoded by something that does it better. But I think the fact that it's a beatdown deck with a combo finish makes it viable, and so I would classify it as a combo deck.
Yeah, and there's also like minor combo-y things, which is just fetching more Nykthoses, making more mana, casting more Storm the Festivals, etc., etc.
Yeah, I mean, you're culminating a game plan into one big explosive turn that hopefully wins you the game. Whether it wins you the game literally that turn, or whether you need to get an attack or two off after, is moot to some extent. The combo has already done its job.
Yeah, and the thing with the deck is the strategic game plan is almost always the same for the matchups. When you're thinking about how you're going into a deck, when you're thinking about how you're going into a matchup, it's relatively linear, right? You're going into it, you're building out to Karn, you're fetching something powerful, untapping your Nykthos, and you're making a shit ton of mana every single game.
You don't have as opposed to, like, let me just contrast that with your Rakdos mid-range side, which is every card in the deck is modal in some way. I mean, headlined by Fable the Mirror Breaker, which is the most modal card I've maybe interacted with. Blood Tithe Harvester, obviously incredibly modal. Even things like Underdog, Tenacious Underdog, the fact that you could ditch it to the Fable and then blitz it back if you really want to. Like, there's a lot of decisions to be made in that deck, and the decisions that you make for each card are more nuanced necessarily than the mono green version, which is you're just, casting your spells, and you're the mechanics of what you're doing need to be amplified, but the cards themselves don't have as many decisions. Would you agree?
Yeah, and it's a great contrast because the mechanics of the Rakdos deck are extremely simple. You're going to have one or two spells you can play on your turn, but choosing between the spells and choosing the modes for the spells is the challenge, right?
Definitely.
So it's a very simple deck. Like, there's some technical stuff like, if I get two Fables, or if I get a Fable and a Blood Tithe Harvester, what am I gonna do? Like, blah blah blah. But that's not the skill of the deck. The skill of the deck is knowing what your opponent's doing and where to time your interaction, where to time the different things that you need to do based on a game plan that you formulated. Whereas for mono green, the timing is not as important as the timing on particular turns. For mono green, it's how am I going to... It's not how am I going to play differently against a control deck. It's how am I going to get my stuff out before this control deck is able to stop everything I'm doing.
Can I potentially make a poor analogy? Would you say that a good mono green player would be apt to a good solitaire player, whereas like a good Rakdos mid range player would be a good, pick whatever card game, a good poker player, for instance.
Ooh, that's a very impoverished analogy you got there. I totally agree.
yeah, of course. I'm just saying, like, you could see solitaire as something low strategy, but like being good at solitaire is a thing, right? There are people that are very good at solitaire and people that aren't.
Help, but
the fact that like you're there with your set pool of resources and your job is to construct the puzzle, right? It's not an easy thing to do necessarily, even though it's completely determined by yourself. Whereas decks high in strategic gameplay have a high strategic gameplay skill cap are much more influenced by how they're reading the opponent and how they're interacting with people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And it's like being so aware of interactions in the way that the Rakdos midrange does. Like it's there in the card choice too. Like you can see it just by the way the decks are constructed. Every card has multiple sides and has instant speed and non-instant speed options. Has like
to make a splash.
There's so many different ways that you can construct a turn to serve different game plans, and that's the same way with these like card game analogies. Mm-hmm. The way that you're playing out the game is all it's just completely
I'll be
different.
back with friends.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's interesting that we have an environment
Nobody knows Dominaria
that
shadows like me.
highlights both fairly evenly, and it's also equally interesting to me that they're similar deck speeds, which you don't totally get with strategic. Like, it's pretty rare that you'll have decks with different strategies that are playing at similar speeds. And I don't mean instant speed versus sorcery speed. I mean when they're gaining their advantage and when they're closing the game.
Yeah.
I think you could probably argue that Rakdos midrange is a little slower, just on when it literally closes the door. Because I think mono green wants to combo off by turn 5 or so, like ideally.
Yeah. And even if not combo off, like put as many permanents on the board as they physically can.
Yeah, but I would say that Rakdos midrange wants to have a winning advantage by turn 5, even if it's not closing the game by turn 5.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think that a lot of the ways that that Rakdos is able to beat mono green is getting underneath them and having interaction at the key spots.
Right. Which is a key example of how Rakdos midrange can alter its strategy in order to be a winning deck, because that deck does have a lot of flexibility in how fast or slow it can go. I mean, having a fistful of 2-mana 3/2s is good. Those are aggressive creatures with upside. Whereas I don't think the mono green version exactly has that, but I mean, just the size of its creatures turning sideways is, I think, pressure enough most of the time.
And honestly, Cavalier, the green Cavalier, that'll stabilize any board. A 5/6 on turn 4, that's solid.
Right, but that's sort of what I mean. Is like maybe it can't speed up as much, but it has so many ways of stabilizing that maybe it doesn't have to. Maybe it's fine just like playing the control role most of the time and comboing off to win the game.
Mm-hmm. I definitely think that between the two, mono green has it is a slow when it's playing against mid range decks. It's a slower mid range deck.
Well, because it has the ability to be, right.
Yeah,
like the Rakdos mid range,
it has a deterministic win.
Exactly.
So as long as the game, it has the inevitability in the matchup.
Mm-hmm.
Which just means Rakdos is on a clock, and a good Rakdos player who recognizes their strategic game plan would know that they're on a clock and speed up accordingly.
The ocean surges,
Exactly.
life thrives.
And then the technical play in there is a game to game issue. That's the actual implementation, right?
Yeah. I mean, exactly. That's the thing. I think I've maybe had one game with mono green that has had any sort of game plan changes, and it was a mono green mirror.
Yeah, well, I was just
gonna
gonna
have to change the game plan.
I was just gonna ask that. So, if we're saying that the mono green strategy is super inelastic,
Let's get moving.
meaning you don't really change it all that much on the matchup. How do the mirrors go, and how do you determine who's the beatdown, who's not in those matchups? And just for the sake of the listener, the whole who's the beatdown thing is we've talked about it in the past. It's a super seminal article from 1999, but to me that's the core of strategy. Now there's other strategic things that go into who's the beatdown, but the first thing you have to determine is who's going to be attacking and who's going to be defending, who wants the game to go long and who wants the game to end soon. And so in these mirrors,
there's really only the two options.
Yeah, exactly. And throughout games, you go in with one game plan, and you could even alter it in the game, where maybe you start off as the beatdown, but then you realize that you have a control strategy that might win. So let's not get too into the weeds here, but in the mirror, how do you determine who's the beatdown and who's not?
So in the mirror, a lot of the times it's literally who's on the play is the beatdown, which I know a lot of people will complain about. Oh, well, it's a coin flip who wins the mono green mirror. But there are ways to get edges in the matchup that come down
wait a
to
moment.
strategic gameplay, actually. Because both of you should be if you're both competent in technical gameplay, right? It comes down to, well, how do you formulate a game plan to be the same person?
Yeah.
So a lot of it comes down to where you can find your tech to get the matchup. I'll give you an example. I recently played a mono green mirror, and god damn it, it was the one time I was not recording. I was recording a mono green video, shut the recording off, and was all right, I'll just do one more game.
Contain your rage.
Hopped on and had the game of my life. It was a mono green mirror. Game 1, came down to both of us trying to out technical gameplay each other, where I land some Karn. We both have Karn and Fiora on the battlefield. We both are like untapping lands, putting out a bunch of Cavaliers, putting out our Cityscape levelers. And what ended up happening was he had more of the gas than I did. He was able to find more
I
of
ebb and flow with battle.
what's the name? Storm the Festivals, and able to get more cardboard out onto the battlefield. I tried to take it over with some of the some Karn searches, picking up Karn Silex, wiping the board, but didn't wipe the board in time for him to get a Cityscape leveler onto the battlefield.
Right.
Then game 2 was just a race. I comboed off first. I comboed off turn 5. Then just went like infinite from that. He probably had like some Storm the Festival in hand. He probably had some other way of interacting, some other thing to do. But I was on the play, so I won. Then the last game, it came down to a slugfest where I was able to combo to just get the Karn onto the battlefield, fetch up a Cityscape leveler, get it onto the board, kill his Karn. Then he
must train
stone-brained, which that's 2 mana. It's from the new set. It's 2 mana for an artifact that you tap and you can name it, and it basically it removes all of the cards of that name from your opponent's library and graveyard. He's stone-brained by Storm Festivals because he knows what the matchup is about, getting more cardboard onto the battlefield. And that's when you need a different strategic gameplay. Right? So from there, I spend the whole rest of my time trying to remove permanents from his board. So, like, instead of, like, fetching up... so, from there, I fetch up something to kill all of the permanents on the board and leave me with just a Cityscape leveler, him with land. Then it's a top deck war, and he's top decking elves, I'm top decking lands. Ends up that strategic gameplay change won the match. Which, I mean, that's the thing. With the mono green matchup, you need to change what you're doing. Like, with the mono green mirror, you need to change what you're thinking about while you're in the game, not necessarily before the game. Because once you get to those critical turns, you need to identify what the key points of interaction are. And if you're identifying what the key points of interaction are, then it's a technical decision of, well, do I pick... I understand that I need to fuck with this Karn. Do I pick Pithing Needle to do that? Because that also Pithing Needle's my own Karn, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it. What's funny is that what you're describing sounds similar to control mirrors, which is like the person... you described it as the person that puts the most stuff onto the battlefield wins. I would describe it as the person with the most card advantage wins, which is, you know, Storm the Festival is... it's drawing, quote unquote, drawing you 2 cards, right? And so, like, that's kind of how control mirrors go, where it's like, just the person that draws the most cards tends to win. Because it's 2 people actively trying to out-control each other. No one wants to be the beatdown in that matchup. Because there's just too many, there's too many answers. And so, for one, I think you hit on 2 things, which was, it becomes a lot more of a resource battle than a life total battle. As well as you need to find alternate ways of attacking your opponent. Which you did it through a resource way, your opponent did it through a card advantage way, and you played it out to see who was right. Would you say that's accurate?
Yep, that sounds accurate to me. And I really love the way that you put this with a control matchup, because it ends up looking like a board-based control deck, like the way the Omnic decks.
Right, but you're playing mono green.
Yeah, but you're playing a much less powerful format, and you're playing like something that's just dumping stuff onto the battlefield.
Right. Yeah, so that's super interesting.
Yeah, it's a fun matchup, and I do think that like your gameplay really shines in mirrors.
Yeah, for
Because
sure.
If you're good against the mirror, it's because you're a better player.
Yeah. Well, yes. If you're regularly good in the mirror, yeah, I agree.
Yeah. If over a long time scale,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you have a positive win rate in the mirror, means you're understanding what your strategic goals are and what your technical gameplay is like.
Yeah, and I think what adds like another interesting wrench to this mono green mirror matchup is that you don't have a board. Because I would argue that like in most other mirrors, I agree that like it is the best example of your technical gameplay, but you can get pretty tricky with a board in a mirror, and look like a really different deck depending on what deck you're playing, obviously. Whereas this doesn't actually have that skill cap. It's just you run it back.
Yeah, I mean,
which is
again,
kind of interesting.
Like, this goes into strategic gameplay, because even when we were talking about strategic gameplay with deck building as well, there's no mirror breakers really in mono green, and most of the deck is 100% set.
Yeah,
Everyone
literally
knows what
and
the best
figuratively.
Yeah, I mean, every single player who plays mono green knows what the best 15 artifacts to put in your board are.
Yeah,
and they may have a card difference, like, oh well, I put the 9 mana, the new 9 mana card, the Phyrexian Portal, in my deck, and he puts Heart of Fear in his deck. Like, that doesn't make a huge difference. What makes the difference is like, how you actually play the deck, because like even in the main deck, there's 6 flex slots, exactly 6 flex slots. I can tell you what they are. And there's only 6 because we don't have Oath of Nissa.
Right, yeah. So then it would be 2
Otherwise,
flex
there'd be
slots.
2. Yeah.
Okay, what are your flex slots then?
Oh, okay. This is a good thing. My flex slots are, I've replaced the 4 Oath of Nissa with 2 Paradise Druids and 2 Lovestruck Beasts.
Sure, I like
Right.
the Lovestruck Beast edition.
Yeah, I think it's good to have the early plays, and Lovestruck Beast really helps stabilize.
Yeah. Yep.
little
And it
bit
helps.
extra ramp and a
Well, it
little
does
bit of,
both, right? It helps you stabilize and it helps you go faster against the decks you need to go faster against. It
That's the thing. It doesn't really go. I mean, sure,
Not in the
it helps
mirror,
you go
but-
faster, but the real problem is like it's not actually that great against control, because they can just kill whatever 1 mana, whatever,
Yeah, yeah.
either the 1/1 human or your elves, and then it can't attack. But
Sure.
the it serves the game plan, is what I like, the overall game plan of the deck. It's
Yeah,
like
and it
kind
blocks-
of half of an old growth.
I was gonna say, yeah, blocks and attacks into old growth troll. Also, like in this deck in particular, it's like how many elves are you running? 8?
8.
You're running all 8. Yeah. So in this deck, it's
Yeah.
it's better than just a naked Lovestruck Beast, right? That's only relying on the token.
Yes.
Like you have 8 other things that you actively want on the battlefield anyway, so you can reliably know that you can attack and block with it.
Yeah. It makes me wish that Paradise Druid was a 1/1.
Hit that
But yeah,
Tangled
so
Florahedron, my guy. That's a
You
one
know,
one.
The hexproof is not negotiable, honestly.
Is
Like,
it really
it's
that
so
good? Oh wow.
Oh yeah. It makes it feel like when I'm casting a 2 mana ramp spell, there's no way that you can interact with it, because I've got Wolf Haven and Paradise Druid. Paradise Druid has hexproof. Wolf Haven is like an enchantment on a basic land. How are you
Yeah,
gonna
it's
fuck with that?
yeah. Yeah, so I guess
So
making
those
it
are-
less interactable's a huge upside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are replacing Oath of Nissa.
Mm-hmm.
Then the 2 cards replacing what would normally be off-color planeswalkers, either Nicol Bolas or Teferi, who slows the sunset in the regular mono green matchups. I've replaced those with 1 copy of Nissa, who shakes the world, and 1 copy of Sky Sovereign.
Yeah, I think both of
console
those are fair.
Yeah, they're good against different matchups.
Just let it
Honestly,
slip
it
away.
might be reasonable to go 2 Nissas instead of the Sky Sovereign.
Interesting. I was kind of
This is-
thinking about going the other way. This is an amazing card. It's just I don't know if it's diluting the top of your curve anyway. Like
Well, the nice
Sky
thing
Sovereign
with
gives
Nissa,
you a different access to attack. It's removal. It's also a flyer.
yeah, the thing with Sky Sovereign is you can attack down planeswalkers, and it helps you like kill creatures out of Rakdos midrange.
Right.
But the thing with Nissa is it's better on the combo turns,
Right.
because it untaps Nykthos, and then if you get to untap with Nissa, you have way more mana. Than you
Yeah. Yeah.
So storming into Nissa is basically like it's a 5th copy of Kiora.
Yeah, for sure. It's a 5th copy of Kiora and like a pseudo 5th copy of Nykthos. It's giving you a
Yeah.
ton more mana too. Yeah, I could buy
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So that's really the deck, and the sideboard slots. Other than those flex slots, the sideboard slots are basically all set.
They're all known.
Yeah, I mean, some of the things are like pretty flexible. Like some people don't run Godpharaoh statue, but that's the top end that I like. You need a black source of mana in either your main deck or your sideboard. Some people play Golos to tutor up a black source. I play Golden Egg because I think that it's cheaper and better and a lot easier to use. And that's just to do the Pestilent Cauldron combo. Heart of Kirin's not necessary, but I think that sometimes you fetch it just to protect your planeswalkers, and it serves the combo. Because when you have a Heart of Kirin, you don't need 2 copies of Kiora and Karn. You don't need 4 copies. You just need the 2. Because you can crew it a bunch of times and just kill these planeswalkers, put them in the graveyard, and then cast your Pestilent Cauldron.
Oh,
backside.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was uncalled for.
Stonebrain is extremely important in the mirrors. You need that. Karn Silex, good against aggro. Unlicensed Hearse, good against Greasefang, and that's it.
So do you ever want to fetch the same artifact twice? That's never a
Yes.
consideration?
Yep. I have definitely considered that. And that's
Okay.
a great question. And if I had to put 2 copies of any card, it would be Cityscape Leveler.
Yeah.
The card is a house. It is the best card in the sideboard, and I always want more of them.
I mean, I think that's fair,
Usually
right?
one's enough.
Yeah, I mean, of course one's enough, but especially in these grindy games, especially in the mirror, it's like, that might be your little bit of strategic tech that you can influence on the metagame, which is like, I'm actually running, 2 Cityscape Levelers so we can go back and get another one if we need to.
Yeah.
And that's
There's
something
definitely
for...
times when I've been in a match and I've fetched Godpharaoh statue. and
Yeah.
I've just been like, God damn, I wish that was a second Cityscape Leveler, because this is the only other top end. That's why Hangerback Walker's in there. I have that as like trying to be a second top end card and possibly stabilize against bigger decks, like decks that have big creatures, because this can outscale. With enough mana, it can outscale Cityscape Leveler. With enough mana, it can outscale some of the like bigger threats.
Also good against
So-
aggro.
Yeah, it
you-
is
if you
definitely
need
good
it to
against
be.
aggro.
Yeah.
Though the best card against aggro is by far Shadow Spear, which
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, yeah, it's
I'm just thinking if you get off to
phenomenal
a slow draw against aggro and you don't have the creature that to put Shadow Spear on, a little 4 mana Hangerback Walker will do it for you.
Yeah, yeah.
Not that you want to put yourself in that position anyway, but it's nice to have.
That's kind of the whole point of the deck, right? These are things that are nice to have access to when you need them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, part of the technical gameplay, knowing what to fetch with your card. Like, strategic might be putting the right stuff there, but when you're in a situation, when you're like put into a situation, you gotta improvise, figure out what to do next.
For sure, and like I think part of the where technical gameplay and strategic gameplay, in my opinion, sort of like blur the lines a little bit, is occasionally I will get a suboptimal card because I know or I think I know my opponent has an answer to it, and force them to either use their answer on the second best card or wait for the best card. So I think the most obvious example of this is in a deck with counterspells, for instance. Let's say, actually, this came up in our showdown with Raxac, I think. You played a Shieldred because you didn't care as much about it, so that I answered it so you could play your Cletus.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember that.
And this comes up all the time, and this is sort of where your technical gameplay and your strategic gameplay mesh, where it's like, okay, Cletus is the best card in this matchup. I need to play to Cletus. Cletus is going to win me the game. I think this sack deck has an answer. I'm going to play Shieldred because Shieldred might win me the game. Like, Shieldred's still a must-answer card.
Yeah.
And it's up to me as the opponent to say, okay, can I win around a Shieldred? or do I need to fire off my removal and make them have a cleanest? And that's where the game starts to have fun.
Build a shield. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's the best decks have that, right? Where their second best card is still able to win the game.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, I feel like the better you get with each of these aspects, the better you're going to get in the game.
Yeah, yeah.
So being able to intermesh the two is like that's a next level skill. That's a level up right there.
Yeah.
Because you can build all of these like technical heuristics, but if you're not willing to break the heuristics to win a match, then you're not actually serving the strategic game.
Yeah, that's
You're
what
not actually building a strategic game.
Exactly. And when you see some super high level play, this is why high level play is super fun to watch. Sometimes they make completely nonsensical decisions. And they're only nonsensical, and I don't mean literally nonsensical. I'm saying because you're an objective observer and you could see both players' hands, the players are making decisions that make no sense to you. But because of the implications of the ways both players have played the game, they're now playing on a very different axis than the observer is. Right? Because they have incomplete information and what have you. And you might see a player cast a spell that doesn't make any sense in the scenario, and then the other player just lets it resolve, or they counter it. You know, it's players playing, interacting in such a way that because they're thinking on a much higher level than the average person is, it could look like their game states or their decisions make no sense, but they all have this overarching reason for it. I know, I mean, not to derail us too much, but there was some Constructed Resources podcast recently where LSV was talking about, it wasn't recently, but I was listening to it recently on, like, I think it was Play Like a Pro or something like that, or pro moves for pro players. And
that is a very old episode. I have
yeah. And they were talking about like LSV was talking about this leveling ward he was getting in with somebody he was testing with, and I won't paraphrase the story just because it's a little intricate. But if you're listening to it, go listen to that episode. It's a great
go listen to the episode.
Yeah, it's a great story where like LSV telegraphed a counterspell intentionally because he wanted his opponent to let him counter something. And because LSV was telegraphing a counterspell, he just let him counter it. Because, and this is where all the high level thinking comes in. If your opponent wants you to do something, you probably shouldn't do it. Like the higher level of the gameplay you get to, the more complex those decisions get as to like what your opponent actually wants you to do.
Oh yeah. I remember watching Worlds with Ely Cassis and Nathan Stoyer going at it in the finals. There was one game where Ely Cassis is playing around a Make Disappear that he doesn't know that Nathan Stoyer has. The whole game. And he had it the whole time, right? So he's like doing this, like, I think that you have this, making that call and playing the game correctly based on that call. The entire game wins that match. And, or I actually don't know if he, not match, wins that game. I don't think he won that match. But then another game in that three-match set, he's playing against Nathan Stoyer again. He's playing around this counter super hard, just trying to, like, maneuver his game state in a way that ensures that he's able to finish the game correctly, including playing around counters, even though the guy doesn't have it.
Right.
So standing from the outside, you're watching both of these things happen, and it's like, oh, he is playing consistently. He is playing with a high level of technical proficiency, but he's playing against odds, and that's really the game, being able to play against odds.
Right, and this is where the high level strategy war comes into play, right? So let's say you know your opponent's playing against the Make Disappear, right? And or let's say the flip side, you know your opponent's not playing around to Make Disappear, and you have one in your hand. You may not fire it off, even though you like it's a good time, it's an efficient time to, because your opponent's posturing that they don't care about it. You should wait. like
Yep. And it reps not having it, so they may
Exactly.
have something more important that you can.
Exactly.
Yeah.
and so all of these things really feed into why you make the strategic decisions you do. But the technical stuff, to your point much earlier in this podcast, is much more calculable.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean that's the thing. It's the interplay of the two that's why this game is so interesting and fun.
Yeah, exactly.
I did have one other question relating to this, like
Yeah,
just
go
while
for
we're
it.
on the topic of this. What do you think about open deck lists in all of this? Like
Open
do
deck lists make things way more interesting, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Because
I totally agree.
there are certain people that even I want to say the Arena Decklist pod or somebody was talking about it, where like somebody will put a singleton of a card in their open deck list because they know it's open and they want people to think about it, which I find
It's the classic one mana tithe in the 75.
right.
You gotta put it in there just in case, you know. And I think that's
yeah.
like even another level of abstraction that makes the game interesting, right?
Yeah, you're teching your deck building decisions in order to change the way your opponent plays their turns.
Yeah, and
by just looking at your deck.
to some extent, like this matters less nowadays because I do think deck lists get out there even in paper tournaments really quickly,
Yeah,
even if they're not
And tons
full
of people.
deck lists.
like at these like big events, people scout.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
You know,
But I do think it's interesting, the idea of open deck lists and being able to look at exactly what your opponent's playing. Because that's something I often run into, where it's like I'm playing around something that their deck just can't possibly have, especially on ladder, right? Where like some of the deck lists don't make any sense because people are playing insanity, and like you might be playing around something that just they don't have.
that's the thing. You gotta update your mental technical game by
Yeah.
just reading millions of deck lists that come across Twitter.
Sure, but I mean,
They can't have that. Nobody plays that.
but
They
on
would
ladder
be stupid
especially.
to play it, and then they have
And then
it.
they just run it out right into you. Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Like on ladder, people could be playing a whole host of garbage. So
Yeah.
that part of the game matters a little less. But I knew when I was tuned up super tight and I was playing great Magic, I had a
bring
really
things
good
up to a
understanding of the
simmer.
meta, and that's a huge way of
You
getting
and I are gonna
advantage.
take 'em out.
Literally knowing what's in your opponent's deck can make these strategy and tactical decisions
Today's
even
my
deeper.
lucky day.
Yeah.
And open deck lists help with that, but on Arena, there's not a whole lot of options to play open deck list, unless you're doing tournaments through MTG Melee,
Right.
which most Arena events are not run through that. It's all like exterior stuff. So if you're doing like Dream Hacks or some of the other things, but they aren't always run on Arena. So the like, I guess the way that you can approximate that is like looking up deck. I mean, we were joking about it earlier, but knowing the
Let's get
format,
moving.
feeling out what your opponent has played, and also remembering what they've played against you in the match in
Yeah.
games 2 and 3. Huge level for what you can plan around in your strategic game and what you can play around in your technical.
Oh, this?
Yeah, and knowing the most recent tech from the pros is good too, especially because when the new tech is invented or discovered, people adopt it without really knowing what it's for. And so knowing the point
Aw,
is,
you're looking a
even if you're
little
not playing the deck that the tech was discovered for, is an important part.
Yeah, and it's so funny. Every single person I've ever seen give sideboard advice, it's always to, like, whatever sideboard a person that you're net decking from is like has put there, ditch it and just put cards that you think are going to be good in the matchup, and then
Right.
play some games and replace the cards that are bad.
Yeah, I mean that's how I make sideboards, so like it makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, if you don't understand what the plan for a card is, you can't enact that plan, which is that strategic game.
And sometimes the plans can be counterintuitive, like we've been saying this whole time, in the
I
way
am
that
out
a
of
green mid-range deck, the mirror
One
could sometimes
drop
look like control
ripples
mirror.
and grows.
Like sometimes these decks play out in this sort of way, and misusing sideboard cards is a huge leak. It's a good way of losing win rate.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Okay, is there did you want to round this out in any sort of way? I know you had something
Yeah. I had a little game like we've been doing for the past little bit, but this is not a game with a right answer and a wrong answer. Just like all strategic gameplay isn't a game with a right answer and a wrong answer. Instead, I have a little question for you of how you would play out a hand of in a Rakdos mid-range deck. What's the like? You're given an opening hand. What would be your plan to play out the following turns?
Okay. And do I know who I'm playing against? Or what I'm playing
So
against?
the scenario is you're game 3 on the play versus Greasefang. You won the first game, you lost the second game, now you're on the play. You've boarded however you wanted. And your opening hand is 3 lands, a Fatal Push, a Thoughtseize, Fable of the Mirror Breaker, and a Blood Tithe Harvester.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so my instinct...
So what would be... Go ahead.
So this is how I go about this, right? I try to fit the mana into the turns I'm going to have, right? Obviously. And then whatever is... You typically can't fit all of your spells into the 7 cards you have in your hand. So I look for the outlier. So, in my opinion, the first thing I see is that this Blood Tithe Harvester is coming down after this Fable the Mirror Breaker. That's the first thing I see. And because if I can control the board for the first couple turns, land my Fable, then the Blood Tithe Harvester, we have a good position. If I let them do their game plan early in the game, I have no shot. So my instinct is to Thoughtseize turn 1, either looking for their... do I actually want their Greasefang? Yeah, probably looking for either their Greasefang or some Enabler. Does that deck play Llanowar Elves?
Like a Grizzly Salvage. No, they don't play
Yeah,
Llanowar Elves.
yeah, like a Grizzly Salvage, fine. And then turn 2, I guess this is influenced by what I see in their hand, but upon just looking at my cards right in my opening hand, I'm totally fine leaving up the push on turn 2, and then turn 3 I'm going to play my Fable and start gaining a winning advantage on my side. So that's my game plan in that matchup with that opening hand.
Okay, interesting. Now, what? So, the strategic game plan is you want to be able to interact with their combo, interact with their like key pieces as quickly as possible.
Very early on, yeah, because the way I lose this game with this hand most often, in my opinion, is they just turn 3 combo me.
Yeah.
And this hand has no defense against a turn 3 combo unless you proactively prevent. It sounds stupid to say proactively prevent because proactivity versus reactivity in Magic typically looks different than that. But I'm trying to proactively defend against their combo early, and then establish a board state after their combo's fizzled, and then I trust the deck to be able to, with your chapter 2 on the Fable, with your Blood Tithe beating down. Like this is a Blood Tithe beat down kind of strategy. And then having the backup plan of being able to Fable your Blood Tithe Harvester and into removal, and then hopefully I'll be able to dig myself into a win.
Okay. You and I totally agree on the strategic gameplay, right? And I think we totally disagree on like the technical gameplay of it, which is super interesting and exactly what I wanted to talk about, because you and I have the exact same like strategy of the deck, right? Greasefang wins against mid-range by just landing the combo, right? You can't get those. You need to be interacting. But what turns we have about like when we want to interact with the combo is different, right? You're trying to get out in front of it as quickly as possible, hold up the Fatal Push, and do the other like the things that are important, right? But the thing is, I feel like the turn order is different between the two of us, because when you slam the Fabled Mirror Breaker, that's their turn 3. That's when they can land a Greasefang, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to prevent the Greasefang this obviously changes as like we're just talking about the opening hand, right? And so
Yeah.
like depending on what you see from the Thoughtseize, I mean I know in this scenario you haven't cast the Thoughtseize yet, will change that. But I'm kind of assuming that any starting hand the opponent has is going to have a Grease Fang in it, and I'm going to take it with my Thoughtseize. And so they're going to have to find an alternate game plan while I'm accruing value
Like,
with my Fable. Yes, I'm shields
Either a
down
Grease
turn
Fang
3.
or something to try and fetch the Grease Fang.
Yeah, like I'm
either
shields
a
down
2-mana
on-
play that digs towards it.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm either shields. I know I'm going to be shields down turn 3 more than likely, unless the Thoughtseize sees something that proves otherwise. But my goal is to prevent their turns 1 and 2 in such a way where their turn 3 isn't lethal.
So, let me pitch you by how I had thought of like playing out this hand.
Mm-hmm.
So the key combo turn is turn 3, right?
Yeah, I agree.
That's when they land the Grease Fang. That's
Yeah,
when they
yeah.
do whatever. Turn 1, play swamp, hold up, fatal push, don't kill anything because they don't have any good turn plays. The only things that they can play are like Stitcher Supplier.
Yeah,
Right.
who cares? Yeah.
Yeah, who cares about that? Turn 2, Blood Tithe Harvester to get some pressure on the field. What their play is, turn 2 is either going to be Grizzly Salvage or something that can right? Then we'll be able to see what they do that turn. Either there's going to be a Parhelion in the graveyard, or there's not going to be a Parhelion. Based on whether or not there's a Parhelion in the graveyard, I'm either going to, on turn 3, slam Fable of the Mirror Breaker and say, well, with 3 mana, you can't both play a Grease Fang and put Parhelion in the graveyard. Or, if they do have it in the graveyard, Thoughtseize and keep up Fatal Push with the Sacrifice the Blood Push.
Yeah, that's a good line. I think the way I'm thinking about this is like I think that's a fine line. What you're doing is and this is sort of technical, right, or tactical, what have you. I'm trying to maximize my tactical advantage of the Thoughtseize turn 1 because your turn 1 Thoughtseize gives you the most gameplay advantage, and I'm recognizing that my Blood Tithe on turn 2 isn't actually that much better, in my opinion, than the Blood Tithe on turn 4. And so, like, getting it down on turn 2 is not a huge, it's not a huge priority of mine. So I'm willing to leave up the push on turn 2, because I think turn 4 Blood Tithe Harvester is, I won't say just as good as turn 2, but is still good.
The other thing is, like, it leaves you open to be faster if you want to be, right? If you Thoughtseize turn 1, and you don't see them able to, like, and you don't have anything that you want to push
Yeah,
them to,
let's
you
apply
can
the
play
pressure.
that, right?
Yeah, for sure.
That's the thing. I think that's the difference. You're maximizing the information you get on turn 1, and I'm trying to maximize, like, being able to catch it. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
The
Yeah,
only thing I
because-
really want to take with Thoughtseize is Grease Fang. I don't really want to take a Grizzly Salvage. I don't really want to take, like, you know, a Rafine's Informant.
Yeah,
Something
and this
stupid.
this goes into like a different topic that I actually wanted to make its own podcast, but we'll touch on it here. It's you can actually narrow down the range of hands your opponent's going to have pretty significantly, even on turn 1, even before turn 1. But like for instance, I'm assuming that a Grease Fang player is going to
My
want to have Grease
purpose
Fang
is
in their
greater
hand
than myself.
turn 1 against Rakdos mid. Because they just want they don't want the game to go that long. They want the most explosive turn. They want to catch you off guard. So that's the first thing in my consideration is that it's probably unless the player has like a way of getting Grease Fang very easily, they're probably going to want to start with the Grease Fang in their hand.
Yeah, and also, like, planning around sideboarding, they're going to want to land their stuff before you get your unlicensed Hearse out, before you get your Go Blanks out.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so, in many ways, you can, if the opponent mulls to 6, you can infer that the first hand probably didn't have a Grease Fang in it, and if they kept 6, and this is where it gets really tricky. Did they snap keep on 6, or did they mull keep on? Or did they tank keep on 6?
Yeah.
And this is where things get super interesting. And so you can really start to infer
as to what the player has in their hand by their timing and by what you know is important in the matchup against you. And so I think, like, just for one extra example of this, I'll just use a generic example. An aggro deck goes turn 1 tapped Shockland go. Okay, but they kept 7. What could that aggro
Why
deck...
don't they have a why don't
why
they
don't-
have a 1-drop? That's the
Right.
thing, yeah.
So what's in their hand? Probably 2 Chandras in this abstracting thing.
Krakens,
Right.
leviathans,
So
octopuses,
what
serpents,
range of
I
hands
love
will
them all.
cause them to
I
keep
advise
a
that
7-carder without a turn 1 play as an aggro deck? And so now you can really start to narrow down exactly what the opponent has. And again, I wanted this to be its own episode, so I don't want to go too deep into it. But
Yeah,
these are the
let's-
these are the
let's-
kinds of
let's-
things that I think very heavily about.
Yeah, and honestly, like, being able to maximize your gameplay in that, what decisions you make during the game should be based on, like, as much information. Getting information that way is just as good as getting information by, like, that's deck lists on the play. Thinking
Yeah.
through what they had in the games before. It's the same type of information. It's
Yeah.
just also, like, of what the person... It's narrowing down what they have to what they've actually played.
I also think this is an important point that it took me a while to figure
I
out.
love to make a
You generally have to
splash.
trust that your opponent's good at the game.
Yes.
If the whole scenario that I just laid out doesn't work if you assume your opponent sucks. If you assume your opponent sucks, then an aggro deck playing a tapped Shockland on turn 1, you just assume
Just
that
means
that guy
they're stupid.
yeah, you just assume that the guy should have mulliganed, and you'll play the game completely incorrectly if you do it that way. You have to assume that
The
they're
worst
playing
part is-
that they kept 7 for a reason.
I really do hate that because, like, sometimes at the ladder, that's just not true.
Yeah,
They
but
are
yeah.
just stupid.
But
like-
yes, but this is the
That's
point
the
of playing optimally, right? So playing optimally should
Playing
give you the
optimally
most
doesn't
win rate
yeah.
against an opponent that's also playing suboptimally. So the idea of playing optimally, right, is if the opponent is just an idiot, you're probably going to win anyway.
Mhm.
So
So
you might
maximizing
as-
win rate, you play like you're playing against somebody very good.
exactly, yeah. That's somewhat obvious, but like it's not always obvious. Like,
Yeah. I don't know, dude. This is a gut feeling. I get so mad when I see misplays by my opponent. It's
That's so
it's
funny.
like it's so frustrating.
I get-
I got a story. I was playing I was playing against what's the name of the card? The one that fetches cards out of your deck. What's the field? Indomitable Creativity.
Mm-hmm.
I was a mono green deck playing against Indomitable Creativity, and I got to go off with the combo, right?
Mhm.
While I'm going off with the combo, this guy has a Coma on the field. Now, Coma has an ability that you can sacrifice a serpent, and if you sacrifice a serpent, you can tap any permanent that your opponent has, and it loses all abilities until the end of the turn.
sounds like
So
a
that
good
means you
Nykthos
can-
target.
Yeah, you can tap Nykthos with that,
Yeah.
and he did the previous turn, right?
Yeah, we forgot.
So he did that last turn. He had an extra serpent on the battlefield. I'm currently like trying to go off as quickly as I can, and I'm starting to have the rope come out. Right? I'm playing around him being able to tap my permanents the entire time. Right? I have a second Nykthos in hand. So I'm holding off on putting any land drops on the battlefield.
yeah,
because
for
I'm,
when he taps
like,
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just recasting Restorative Burst over and over. And as my timer progresses, I get canceled out of my combo when I have just barely enough life to mill him out. So it makes me go to the combat step. And right before I went to the combat step, I had to play my golden egg out. I was trying to do it that turn. And then the timer runs out and it pushes me over to combat. Right then, he could have won the game. He could have tapped my
Tap the
egg.
Nykthos.
He
Oh
could
yeah.
have tapped my egg, made it so that I couldn't cast for black mana, and then I would have been stuck with this stupid Restorative Burst in my hand and no way of casting the Cauldron to mill him out. He would have had another turn. He had a huge board state would have swung back in for lethal. But he wasn't paying attention. So he didn't do it, and he lost the game.
I mean, it's funny that you think that makes you angry. That just makes me happy. I like when my
That makes
opponent
me
misplays.
so mad at him. Like, why did you not? You had the opportunity.
The game is
I'm
difficult.
seeing
with
it,
this.
and it makes me feel bad because I'm playing the game like I'm trying to win against a good opponent.
Yeah.
And then when I see him doing these dumb things, like, why am I even playing, man? Like, what? Like, I could just cast these spells in any order that I wanted to and win the game.
Yeah.
He's not willing to interact with me in a way that makes sense. Oh, it was so frustrating, dude.
Well, you got the dub, so it can't be
Yeah.
too bad.
We'll see if I have that game on video. Maybe I'll put up a clip of that if I do, but I don't think I do. Oh, goddamn. Oh, you know what? I don't, because I have no video of the combo going off. Which is a huge sticking point. Huh. All right.
Okay, we'll expect that video in the future, gents.
Yeah, expect something like that. I'll figure out some way of showing off the combo. You might see some mono green footage in the background of this. I got plenty of it.
Oh, sure. That would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, this has been the You See a Pair of Goblins Played podcast.
You've certainly seen a pair of goblins.
Two
We've been going
goblins.
the fuck off. Two goblins. One game. It's
This
the
fe-
only game we play.
This felt like a pretty coherent podcast, considering
Hell yeah, dude, this has been fun.
how technical it was.
Yeah, yeah. We got a little bit too deep into like Pioneer examples, but I'm assuming that our listeners know the Explorer meta.
Our two listeners, yeah, I know the Explorer meta pretty good.
I know the Explorer meta pretty good.
Oh, there we go.
Camera.
So all of our listeners are familiar with the Explorer meta. Okay, great.
Oh yeah. All right, editor.
All right, cut.
Cut.